Hey there, welcome to the Fat Burning Man Show. I'm your host, Abel James, and thanks so much for stopping by. Today I'm stoked to be here with one of my favorite authors, bloggers, and personalities, the Grokman himself, Mr. Mark Sisson. Mark's a former running and triathlon phenom, best-selling author of the Primal Blueprint and other books, founder of Mark's Daily Apple, one of the most popular health websites in the world, and a bona fide cool dude. We had a blast hanging out chatting last month at Paleo FX, and I was totally psyched when he said he'd love to sit down with me and let me pick his brain. But before we get to the show, I'm going to say just a few words. As I mentioned in my last blog post, the Fat Burning Man Show is currently the #2 health podcast in the United States, right behind Jillian Michaels. It's crazy, just bananas. I launched this podcast just a month ago, and it already has tens of thousands of loyal listeners, and I just can't believe how much positive feedback you guys have sent me. So I want to offer my sincerest thanks to everyone who has helped get the Fat Burning Man Show to where it is today. None of this could have been accomplished without you, and I'm very humbled, and I truly appreciate your support. America's in the midst of a health and obesity epidemic, and it's getting worse. The collective health of this country is falling off a cliff. Average Joes, grandmas, children, no one is being spared, and I'm extremely passionate about reversing this trend and helping as many people as I can. We're all in this together, and while we may not be 100% correct about everything, I believe with ironclad conviction that we have an answer that has the potential of improving the lives of millions of people. So, we need to catch up with Jillian Michaels, so please take a minute to leave an honest review on iTunes. And I'll tell you what, for the person who writes the most thoughtful review on iTunes before my next podcast, I'll give away a free copy of my book, The Lean Body Lifestyle, and all the bonuses. Just sign up on fatburningman.com for my email list and shoot me your iTunes handle. Sound cool? All right. Well, here's to the interview with Mark Sisson. Through his blog, best-selling books, and various other endeavors, Mark has stoked the fire. The movement is accelerating, and I can't think of a better time to interview a seasoned veteran who's been living an evolutionarily informed life for decades. So in our interview, Mark and I cover the following: why you shouldn't run a marathon to prove to your ex-girlfriend that you're worthy, how to build lean muscle as a string bean ectomorph, why you shouldn't throw yams at someone who wants to train while keto adapted, and Mark accidentally spills the beans about safe starches. Sorry, Mark. And, of course, we talk about how we're going to beat out Jillian Michaels and take over the world. All right, let's go hang out with Mark. Hey, Mark, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Abel, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I wanted to share with you, Mark, on my Facebook fan page yesterday, a guy named Bill Grennan said, I grew up in a small college town where Mark Sisson was a college running phenom. I was in high school and definitely remember his budding fame at the time. He, like yourself and others in the Paleo Primal movement, have such interesting stories about how they got involved. So, Mark, your fame, even from your college days, precedes you. But for those of you out there who don't know, how did you get into all of this primal paleo madness?
Well, like anything, I think for me it was an evolution, a microevolution. Mm-hmm. I was a runner in college, a distance athlete, and trying to increase my performance, improve my performance in any way that was legally possible, which included extra miles, running as many miles as I could, trying to manipulate my diet to get extract the most number of miles out of the miles per gallon per calorie, mm-hmm. Trying to improve my recovery times. So I've always been interested in that aspect of human performance at the elite level, but as so often happened to people of my generation, we did too much. We did too much too soon. We didn't know how bad, how devastating running might be for the average person. And I was pretty much an average person. I don't have a great deal of genetic legacy in terms of being an elite athlete. I was, sort of maybe middle of the road, maybe toward the elite end, but certainly not in the elite category. If you looked at my raw numbers, my VO2 max, for instance.
Right.
I just worked really, really hard. Ultimately, I think I worked too hard, and the wheels fell off. Mm-hmm. Went in my mid-20s, and I started to, as I was running faster and faster and gaining notoriety and starting to win some races and qualified for the U.S. Olympic trials, the more fit in a strict time sense I became, the sicker I became, and I started to get upper respiratory tract infections. I started to get injured. So my career ended very early because of all of these missteps, and I wound up taking a real hard look at where I was in my life, and having come into this initially with the idea that I wanted to be healthy and fit, and all the things that people want, and I'd sort of lost sight of that in the pursuit of performance.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of backtracked and said, okay, what's it going to take to be lean, fit, strong, happy, healthy, all the things I want, without having to sacrifice so much, without having to tear my body apart and miss out on all the good times that people my age, tend to experience.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was an endurance athlete, I don't think I stayed up past 11 more than a couple times a year, because I was, I was just so fried from the training.
Yeah.
So all these things kind of conspired to make me re-examine where I was, and the first thing I realized was that I did not have to train so hard to maintain a decent body composition. The next thing I realized was that I'd been sacrificing my health in terms of how little fat I was consuming, and when I started eating more and more fat in my diet, it not only did not negatively impact me, it positively impacted me.
Funny how that works.
So I increased the amount of fat in my diet. All through this time, I was already into evolution, and had been interested in it in college. And in my first book that I wrote in 1982, it came out in '83, the Runner's World Triathlon Training Book. So that's been out almost 30 years. I really call upon evolution as a sort of guiding force in terms of extracting performance as an athlete training.
Right.
You have to look to evolution.
Yeah.
So all of these things combined, again, over the years, I wound up pulling together my ideas on training, my ideas on diet, including increasing the amount of fat. And the last piece to fall in place was getting rid of grains. I really held on to my right to eat grains. Damn it. And
when did that change?
About 11 years ago now, and that was really just me finally taking a stance and saying, look, I've done all this research that shows that grains are pretty bad for you. Maybe I'll do my own 30-day experiment, and I did, and it was transformative. All the things that we talk about today, the arthritis in my fingertips and my fingers that I thought was going to just be with me the rest of my life, disappeared. I mean, within that 30 days. The irritable bowel syndrome I had my whole life, that disappeared. Some lingering sinus stuff that I used to get at the end of hay fever season, that disappeared. It was like so crystal clear to me that grains were at the root of a lot of things that I had assumed were just sort of natural effects of me getting older. Because you got to dig that I was already 47, 48 years old when I finally adopted this final aspect of the Primal Paleo way.
Yeah, and you were kind of a lone wolf at the time, right? Just experimenting on yourself for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing research, for the last 20 years. Most of what I've done through the course of the day has been to read studies and to read books and to figure out, where do I fit on this spectrum of what people are seeing in the research or discovering through their own methods. And I, kind of had to carve out a path that worked for me. And so but there's nothing new that I've put together. I mean, I'm the first one to admit that all the stuff that I talk about, people have talked about before I started talking about it. That's for sure. I just sort of borrowed bits and pieces from people like, Cordain and Odette and Melvin Connor and Boyd Eaton and Stephenson, and going way back to to kind of and of course my mission was always to put this in a story that the average person could understand and go, wow, now I get how my body works. So my mission has always been to educate people and do so in a way that makes use of the science for sure, but also tries to describe it in ways that are understandable and easy to get and at times humorous, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you've done that all exceptionally well. You know, the average person certainly isn't going to be slogging through medical journals and that sort of thing. And they shouldn't have to, you know, like living this sort of lifestyle where you're eating real foods doesn't necessitate that. So I think one of the things that I love about your blog is that it is very readable and entertaining as well.
Well, thank you. And, you know, we make a big effort to continually put kind of new spins on the things that we've been talking about. Because, you know, this blog has been in existence almost 6 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started it, I said, well, I'll write something every day for a year, and then I'll run out of things to write, and that'll be the end of that. Well,
Right.
you know, all it did was open up a tremendous new tangents and possibilities of things to discuss. And this is sort of what's led to my new book, which is coming out in a few months, called The Primal Connection, which takes the whole primal blueprint concepts of, you know, the expectations of our hunter-gatherer genes and goes far beyond diet and exercise and looks at social structure, work situations, family situations, and kind of, you know, tries to, again, paint a picture that draws on anthropology and evolutionary biology and science, but then provide practical insights into how to get the most out of one's life.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that, and hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that later. But getting back to what you said about, you know, your genetics and body composition. So now, obviously, you're jacked if anyone has seen your pictures or met you in person. But I would imagine when you were running, you know, 100 miles per week or doing triathlons, you couldn't really support that muscle mass.
It's funny because people, in the old days, people would say that I was pretty muscular for a runner.
Right.
So when I was a marathoner and I weighed between 142 and 145, everyone else around me weighed 125 to 135, and I'm 5'10".
Yeah.
You know, I weigh 20 pounds more than that today.
Right.
And I have the same body fat.
Yeah.
So I had to, you know, I really chewed up all my lean tissue, particularly my upper body tissue, despite the fact that I lifted weights a lot. I was really into lifting to the extent that it was possible at the end of a 20-mile run, you know, some days. But I was very aware that lifting weights was going to be somehow beneficial to even an endurance athlete's overall career and criteria.
Right.
But yeah, between the diet and the amount of chronic cardio that I was doing, it was almost impossible to keep any lean muscle on besides what I required in my legs and you know, lower body to propel myself.
Right. Yeah, I remember when I was running marathons, I was like 147, 148, and now I'm, you know, well above 160, and I have a lower body fat at this point.
Right.
And it just looks and feels incredibly different. And it's mostly the way that it feels. I just feel so much more balanced this way. But I was wondering, Mark, what's your natural body type? You know, all other things equal. Are you
I'm a skinny guy.
Okay.
I'm totally, my dad was 100, you know, he was 5'11", 145 pounds for most of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's still alive. He's gained a little bit of weight, but for well into his 50s, he was under 150 pounds. I have two brothers who are about my height, and one of them probably weighs 135
oh my gosh.
to 145, and yeah. So I come from lean stock, as they say.
Yeah.
You know, just skinny to the extent that that's, you know, you say, well, what was the selection process for you to become a runner? Well, it was because I couldn't do anything else. You know, I was not big enough to play football and survive that. I wasn't really. Maine was a big hockey state, and I just got beat up enough as a 10-year-old and an 11-year-old playing hockey that I realized I didn't want to do that. So I kind of naturally gravitated to running since I lived 2 miles from school, and I used to run to and from school just as a means of transportation.
Yeah, interesting. So being a hard gainer, what does your weight routine look like?
Well, now it's kind of funny. I do as little as possible to
Right.
you know, to maintain, because I'm going to be 59 in July, and at some point you recognize that despite the fact that I have access to all the top information and the best diet, there is a decline in performance as you age, and I did hit my peak at 35, and now I'm trying to kind of just preserve and maintain. And the main focus in my training is to not get injured because I like to play. So I like to spend a lot of time, playing frisbee or hiking or paddling or snowboarding, and I want to do those without injury. So most of my training is contemplated to support the sorts of movement that would be required in these other pursuits that I just described. So a typical, I only lift twice a week. I lift pretty much, full body weight stuff, sometimes weighted with a weight vest, but typically it's pull-ups, push-ups, dips, squats, lunges, pull-downs, just kind of upright rows maybe. But it's all stuff that's kind of, and then I do some ballistic stuff, box jumps, stadium stairs, sprints, and things like that.
Cool. Shifting gears a little bit, right now actually I'm writing a short book on fasting,